Hi there, in this video I'm going to talk about how you can update the firmware version of your camera and how the 1.30 firmware update has affected the autofocus of my Nikon Z6 II. Now, I have mentioned in several videos why I've stopped using my Nikon Z6 II for taking wildlife photographs, and I'm going to recap them shortly in the video. But I have had a few suggestions from subscribers giving me ideas about how I might improve on my problems. Now, one person has suggested some menu settings that I'll talk through in the video shortly, and another person suggested doing the firmware upgrade. Now, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to explain to you how to do that, because it's a good thing to do anyway, regardless about whether you've got any problems, and I'll give you the results at the end of the video. What I've also done is I've taken lots of shots of birds over the last few days with my Nikon Z6 II, and I'll show you those throughout the video and a few more at the end. So sit back, hope you learn a few things, and hopefully I'll help you to enjoy your photography. So if you're new to mirrorless cameras, you might not be aware that the lens mount is completely different to that that's on a DSLR. So all of the lenses that I use on my D850, I can't use natively on my Z6 II. So this lens here is my 200 to 500mm lens, and it's attached at the moment to the Z6 II body, but it's achieved by an adapter just here. This is the FTZ adapter, and basically your F lens goes on here because it's got a slightly smaller aperture at the end, and then this end connects to the mirrorless body, and all the functions should still be intact. Now, when I say all the functions should be intact, I've actually found that they aren't. I've had a few problems that I don't get with my D850. The 200 to 500mm Nikon lens has a built-in vibration reduction, and what happens is that if you've got the lens zoomed right out to 500mm, if you're trying to compose a shot, any slight movement you can see in the viewfinder, and it becomes really apparent, especially if you're hand holding. But on the D850, when I activate the autofocus, the vibration reduction kicks in and the image really noticeably stabilizes. It's very noticeable in the viewfinder, but on the Z6 Mark II that doesn't happen. It's really difficult to demonstrate that on video, but when you're holding the camera and looking through the viewfinder using the D850, it's really noticeable, and it's something that I really do miss. Now, the second problem that I've noticed that many of you have said that you share is if I'm trying to switch from a distant focus to a near focus, especially if the object that I'm focusing on that's close to me is quite small, like a twig or a small bird, the camera finds it almost impossible to acquire focus on that small object near to the camera. And I don't get that problem at all with the D850. The D850 manages it no problem at all. And if you're trying to switch focus from one subject to another, particularly if it's a bird flying into a scene, trying to acquire that focus can be quite critical, because if you don't get the focus quickly, then the bird will fly off and you've missed the shot. So what I've done to demonstrate this issue is I've pointed the camera at one of the perches just outside the hide, and I've thrown off the focus ever so slightly. Then I've put the focus into a single point focus mode to give it the best chance of acquiring an accurate focus lock. But you can see that if I put the square right over the quite dominant part of the perch and start the autofocus, what happens is the focus then acquires a lock on the background behind the perch rather than the perch itself, which is absolutely no use at all. So the only way that I can get a focus is to point the camera down at the ground, focus on that, and then when I come back to the perch, it's nearly in focus and I can just get the focus finally locked on. But this is a very slow and inefficient way of getting a focus, especially if there's a bird that's landed on the perch and you've got to move the camera quickly to focus on the floor. By the time you're back on the bird and found it, the bird will have flown off, either because of the movement or just because you've not been fast enough. So I have had a few comments from subscribers suggesting how I might fix this problem. Now, one subscriber said that watching videos with this problem, nobody appears to mention if they have set the focus tracking speed. That is, how quick the camera is set to move from one focus subject to another. If the camera setting is slow, then the focuser will lag from one focus to another. So if you set this, it should speed things up. So I'll show you how to do that now. So clearly this is a Nikon menu, and will only work on a Nikon, but from the custom menu setting, you go to the autofocus, which is letter A, then down to A3, which is the focus tracking, and then you can change how quick the AF response is. Now, the subscriber suggested moving this up to 1 or 2 to speed this up. So at the moment, I've got it set on 1. So clearly this sounds like really good advice, and it's something that I wasn't aware of before it was pointed out to me. But unfortunately, changing this setting has not made any difference to my ability to acquire focus. Several people have asked me whether the new firmware release, that's version 1.30, has made a difference to the autofocus capabilities. Now, if you're not aware, Nikon has just released a new flagship model, the Z9, which is their new mirrorless camera, and based on the reviews that I've seen, the autofocus seems to be really good. I've seen animals running towards the camera, and the camera can track the eye of the animal all the way through the frame really well. Now, this is partly due to a new processor that's in there, but I was hoping some of the software updates might trickle down into the firmware upgrade for the Z6 II. If we look at the specs for the upgrade, this is what Nikon says the upgrade should actually do to improve the camera. So there's quite a few things there in that update that do seem to relate to autofocus, but nothing specifically that relates to my problems. But I did, however, go ahead and update the firmware. It's really worth doing anyway, despite whether you've got a problem, because it makes sure that your camera is kept working to its optimal performance. And doing that is quite straightforward. So first of all, you need to create a folder on your hard disk on your computer where the update will be downloaded to. Then you go to the Nikon update page, and I'll put a link to that down below in the description, and you download the upgrade into that folder that you've just created. Then you need to run that executable file, which will unpack it and turn it into a file ending in the extension .bin. Then you copy that bin file onto a formatted SD card, making sure it's in the topmost directory. Put the memory card into the camera, and then from the setup menu, you go to the firmware version and follow the on-screen instructions. Once the firmware has been installed, you turn off the camera, take out the card, and when you turn it back on, you will be asked to just confirm the update, and that's it. It's pretty straightforward and quite quick to do. So it's worth noting as well that while I was upgrading the firmware for the camera, I did also upgrade the firmware for the FTZ adapter. And a lot of people don't realize that that little adapter's got firmware inside it. And so I upgraded that as well, just to make sure to give the camera the best chance of making the autofocus work. So the moment you've all been waiting for, has the update made any difference at all to the way that the camera performs? And I've got to say, the answer is a big fat no. I can't really tell any difference. It certainly hasn't improved any of the issues that I had. So the vibration reduction on the 200 to 500mm lens still doesn't work, and I still get the same issue with trying to focus on near objects once I've focused on a far away object. Now, this could be, as some people have suggested, to do with the physical capabilities of the way that the mirrorless camera focuses. All of the bird photos that you've seen in this video have been taken over the last few days with the Z6 Mark II, so it still is a capable camera. It's just that slowness if you need to get a very quick focus lock on a bird that's moved into frame and you were focused somewhere else. If you're focused on one particular place and the bird lands in that area, then you can take some really good photos still. But I just find that with my D850, I've got the capability of focusing much more quickly, and so I just can't rely on the autofocus in the Z6 II. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the best photos I've got over the last few days before I finish up the video. I hope you found that video useful and you now know the importance of keeping your firmware up to date. Even if it didn't solve my problems, there are still little bugs and issues that can get fixed by doing a firmware upgrade. So I still really do love using my Z6ii II, especially for landscape photography, and if the subject isn't moving a lot, it can be useful for wildlife photography as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my eye out on future firmware upgrades. Maybe something will appear that will improve the autofocus, but I'm not really holding out that much hope. What is much more likely is that the improvements that have been made in the Z9 will start to trickle down into other models. Maybe there's a new model on the horizon. There's rumours about a Z8 that might be coming out that will include some of the improvements in the Z9, because the Z9 is a very, very high-end expensive camera and at the moment is over £5,000, and I can't justify spending that kind of money, but the technology usually finds its way into other models. If you've enjoyed this video or have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments or nip over to my Instagram account. That's @theoaktonphotography. You can leave me a comments there, and you can also see lots of my pictures. Now, if you like what I do on the channel, you can also support me by visiting my Teespring store. There I've got a range of merchandise on offer, so go and check that out. But you don't have to spend any money at all to support the channel. You can do that simply by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications. That way you stay up to date with all of my future content and you won't miss out on anything, but it really helps me out as well. Watch out for next week's video. That goes live at 4 o'clock on Sunday. In the meantime, go and check out this video up here. But all that's left now is to say, stay safe and I'll see you soon.